here to Better, Faster, Stronger. It's not all technical. This is a non-technical session put on by myself, Schoettler, Chris Roebuck, and Andy Fenley. We'll each introduce ourselves along the way. Let's go through. We're going to give you a quick, brief summary about what we'll be talking about, each one of us, and then we'll just jump right into our presentations. So I'm going to be talking about how you can think about your team culture and techniques you can use in order to improve it at your business.
So I'm going to be kind of giving a little case study based on an experience, or based on my experiences that I've had, talking a little bit about the psychology, about the types of characters that you will encounter, and why they behave the way they do.
I'm going to tie it all together and say, talk a little bit about software process documentation. So how you generated the personalities, how do you tie it all back in with what you want to do on a day-to-day basis?
Excellent. So while I just plumb in the mic, congratulations on surviving NIWeek. Surprised to see so many faces here, so that's great. Okay, so a quick introduction. My name is Chris Roebuck. I work as a software architect at Conrad Technologies. I'm a LabVIEW architect, test stand architect, but basically LabVIEW cheerleader, and a bit of a team working idealist. I've got a lot of experience working with teams of developers. Oh, rookie mistake. Working with teams, setting up processes, tools to help teams perform better. But really what I'm going to be talking about today is nothing really around LabVIEW, but more about the characters, the people, and their behavioral patterns, some of the traits that I've seen and how I've gone about that. So, yeah, let's get started. So, is this presentation for you? If you are a manager and you want to know why Gerald's estimates for any task are always 2 weeks, no matter what it is, this is a presentation for you. If you're a program manager, wanting to know write software project plans with a greater than 20% likelihood of that plan still being valid tomorrow, this is for you. If you wanted to understand why that one person in your team never uses source code control, this is for you. And team leaders, managers, or developers, or anyone with the misfortune to work with any of the above, then absolutely, this is for you. What I should say is this is not a recipe. I'm not going to give you some magic recipe in the next 17 minutes. It's more about identifying the personality types. I really hope that some of the characters that I'm going to describe in this presentation, I really hope that some of these characters will resonate with you. You probably identify people on your own team who exhibit similar behaviours. I'm just giving you a case study of how I dealt with certain situations. Suffice to say, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So a brief history of mine. I joined a company called Filtronic. That's rendered badly. I joined a company called Filtronic as their first and only developer. They were doing manual testing of RF products, writing results in logbooks, measuring things on benchtop instruments, and I joined and started automating tests using LabVIEW and writing results to a database. So I ruled my kingdom for almost 2 years as a lone developer, but the business grew. Automation is quite addictive as well. They realized, wow, we can save loads of time, let's automate everything. So I needed to grow a team. So I recruited developers. Over the next couple of years, I recruited developers 2, 3, and 4. Developer 2 was distrustful of third-party code, third-party being anybody other than himself, including NI. Developer 3 refused to use source code control and started composing a letter to NI of all the things that were wrong with LabVIEW. Developer 4 formally requested a desk facing away from developers 2 and 3. This was my first inkling that personalities and people could be the biggest influencer on team performance. So that's kind of like a summary of my stress levels in my years with that organisation. It's all good. After I got hired, and then my stress increased as my team grew, so I left. I became a software manager. I was recruited by an aerospace company to lead, as they put it, a crack team of developers. Sometimes I think they were on crack. 29 subcontractors, 7 permanent staff working on just 2 product lines, just 2 projects. Honestly, it was like herding cats. let's put a little context on that. In the first week, I was informed that the previous manager had resigned due to stress. That's just what you want to hear in a new job. In my second week, I was informed that the main project was over a year late. I asked somebody, how do you get to be a year late? They said, 1 day at a time. Week 2, I had to send flowers to the wife of a developer who hadn't been home in 5 days. And then I found out that the program manager was actually on the critical path for one of the deliveries whilst trying to manage the program. They were organised very much by project and a demand for resource rather than looking at the tasks that needed to be performed and looking at any kind of cross-project development. It was very much, this project has these tasks, we need 5 people, and the phrase that I heard that I've come to dread is, let's get bums on seats. So, let's introduce some of the characters. We had Gerald, single-handedly delivered the entirety of the previous project. He hadn't spoken to another member of the development team for over 2 years. Always appeared to be under massive pressure, occasionally heard to say things like, and I hope some of this resonates with you, it will take me 2 weeks to complete. He said that for everything. I could do it myself in the time it would take to explain it to Bob. Then we had Mary, 36 years with the same company, self-taught LabVIEW, lived and breathed the products, real product expert, said things like, they never listen to me when we give realistic durations. It was just better if we do it like we used to. I've seen plenty of idealists come and go from this place. That's really what you want to hear when you're just starting a new role. Oh yes, we had Duncan, created a dialogue class for popping up nice dialogues, over 300 VIs deep. Implemented LabVIEW object-oriented programming with TestStand before it was supported in TestStand. Created an entire scripting language that sat on top of TestStand so that it could write test sequences in ASCII text files and then turn it into a TestStand sequence. And created a complete clone of the actor framework because, in his words, he could. Beautiful code though, absolutely beautiful code. A real case of a solution looking for a problem. That is kind of an example. I mean, talk about complexity. This is the only code that you'll really see. Project control references being written into a cluster, being put into a class, stored in a functional global variable. It's like, how many constructs do you want to use in a single block diagram? We had Andy, ex-developer, promoted, in inverted commas, the project manager, working 14-hour days for the past year. He produced these things he called blobby charts instead of Gantt charts because he didn't understand the dependencies between tasks. Occasionally heard things to say things like, you don't understand how complex this is, we will be finished in 6 weeks provided we get a requirement. How do you know you're going to be finished in 6 weeks if you don't know what it is? The situation is too fluid to produce detailed plans. Maybe that's why it is fluid. Let's get bums on seats. And then my favourite character. My favourite character, Bob. I'm just going to go straight in and quote Bob. I've got 20 years experience in LabVIEW version 3.8. Let's see what's wrong with that. There was no 3.8 that I know of. When he said he'd got 20 years experience, what he meant was he'd got 1 year's experience 20 times. He actually once said to me, it's going to be 12 weeks, but when it's finished, it will be mwah. I don't trust other people with my code. The code documents itself. I think his justification was that he used bundle by name. NI told me that getting certified would be a waste of my time. Guy actually avoids documentation by uninstalling Word off a PC. Job security through obfuscation is this guy's strategy. Yeah, can anybody spot anything wrong with that? So yeah, we've got some real characters in this. I mean, what have we got there? We've got local variables for error clusters. Notice that that's on the outside. We've got an event structure. That's meant to be responsive. That's UI. And then we've got nested sequence structures, at least 36 cases deep, probably more. Fabulous stuff. So I refer to this as really, we were hatching a catastrophe. So No mission statement in the team. What are we doing? Are we building tools? Are we building solutions? Just no real mission statement. No team structure or hierarchy. Everybody were peers, irrespective of whether you were Captain Jack Sparrow or whether you were Mary with 36 years experience or Duncan with his beautiful class hierarchy. Blame culture. The software is always late. So these guys were under intense pressure, right? They were late, they were being told they were late, but still nothing was being done to help them in terms of structure, in terms of tools, in terms of organisation. So they were being failed by the organisation as far as I'm concerned. And experience was undervalued. You know, you've got somebody who's got 36 years experience writing code and not leveraging that experience in any way. No personal development plan. You know, one person was self-taught LabVIEW, been there for 20 odd years and never been through any kind of formal education process in terms of the tools she was using. Again, it's a failure on the part of the organisation. So I'm going to point out a couple of references. I've referenced this book in every single presentation I've given. If you take home one thing from NIWeek, go and get yourself a copy of this book, Joel on Software by Joel Spolsky. He talks about when you're hiring people and adding to teams, but he talks about it, and I think it's relevant to existing teams as well. He talks about the guerrilla guide to hiring, and he said, look, there are only two stakes when you're hiring somebody. You either hire them or you don't hire them. You don't think, well, I could hire them for this, but I'm going to give them a different role. The answer's no then, you don't want to hire them. And he also says you need to look for two traits in people. You're smart and you get stuff done. Okay? So I really like that, and I also, from a project management perspective, this is quite an old text, but the mythical man month, and I love the fact it takes 9 months to make a baby no matter how many women are involved. So, why were the team behaving like this? A little bit of analysis. So, Gerald, he's our smart producer of work, but he was under intense pressure. Like I said, he single-handedly delivered an entire project. So he felt responsibility, but there was no team structure in place to relieve him of any of the unnecessary responsibility that he was feeling. So he falls into my category of smart and get things done. You've got to look after this guy. And I hope that you've probably all got somebody in your team that resonates with. We've got Mary. Mary was self-taught LabVIEW, but she knew the product inside and out, worked there for years, knew the processes, knew how the business ran. But she felt undervalued. She'd had no formal training, there was no structure in place in terms of the team to recognise that experience. So, what did we do about those things? We put team structure in place, we made Mary what was called a responsible engineer. We made her an expert on the product. She was the go-to person. Took her that experience and recognised it in some way. And also put a formal training plan in place to get her that LabVIEW training that she really needed. Because she was disenfranchised as far as I was concerned. Duncan, this is the class guy, it's sat building active frameworks. How's he got time to do this? Well, actually, the guy's bored. The guy's got a brain the size of a planet, and he's got enough work to do. So we made him the architect of the team. His role became the architect who puts the architectures, the tools in place, creates a lot of the tooling, created our software development lifecycle as a group. I referred to him as an architecture astronaut because he was kind of just up there. Andy, he's a developer, not a program manager. This guy was promoted. It's something that's referred to as the Peter principle. You promote somebody to their level of incompetence. This guy needed to be a developer, not a program manager. So we offered him a development role, and he absolutely snapped our nose. And then we've got Bob. Job security through obfuscation. So the first thing we did is say, look, you need to follow a style guide. And I should point out, he was an external contractor that was working with us. But we said, look, you need to follow this style guide. And he falls into the category of not so smart and gets things done. They're the people you've got to be careful with, because in my view, they're a net liability in terms of output of the team. So before I hand over to Andy and Will to talk about some of the tools and the culture and things, my lessons learned, I've described what I did, and I hope that some of the characters and some of the behaviours resonate with people in your own team. But my lesson learned is, don't let project managers bully the team into unrealistic schedules. They were under intense pressure, and that's really unfair of the organisation to have that be direct on them. And they were bullied. 2 weeks for every single task. It was just a default, yeah, the 2 weeks, really 2 weeks. Hire project managers, don't promote developers into the PM role. I really do strongly believe, and I've seen this over 25 years developing test solutions in LabVIEW, the two skill sets, I believe that the skills required to be a successful PM are somewhat different to the skills required to be a successful test engineer or test developer. I don't see it as a promotion as such. And I've seen that in a lot of companies. Value the experience, yeah, you've got to find a way. If somebody, you know, experience with skill is better. If you've got somebody who's experienced and unskilled, let's look at putting a training plan in place for them. But value that experience within your team and make sure that it's accessible. Help developers understand their own velocity. As developers, we are inherently optimistic creatures. I regularly say that it'll take me 10 days without realising what I'm saying, and actually it's years work. But yeah, helping developers understand their own development velocity, I think, is important. Give input to those who give output. So, you know, if people are working and contributing to the team, they're the people that you really need to pull in, get them to help define how the team operates. And we'll be talking more on that in the session. Give architecture astronauts something cool to architect. You know, this guy was bored, so we gave him the whole framework for the team to develop, and this guy was in his element, and that was the role that was meant for him. And he produced some wonderful work and is still having a very successful career. Remove negative influences, fire Bob. Thank you.
All right. You guys hear me? Yep. Quick round of applause for Chris. So I'm going to be talking about the choice for a better team culture. This means a lot of techniques and things that you can learn about how to improve the environment on your team and in your company. Quick introduction to me. My name is Schoettler. I'm a CLA, CLED, CTD, CTI champion. I have about 10 years of experience with LabVIEW, 5 of which were in consulting, and so are in consulting. And so that isn't just software development, but also project management and team management. And so it's been a really great opportunity to see how a lot of different companies and teams operate and learn what works and what doesn't. So first of all, how many of you have experienced members of your team similar to the personalities that Chris mentioned? Quite a bit of hands. Yeah, all right. So you probably wish that some of your team members might be better communicators. Right? You might wish that maybe people would really understand your value on the team better, because it seems like some people just don't really get it or whatnot. So the solution to this is pretty obvious. We all know it. All you need to do is get your team members to respect each other, work as part of a team, understand each other, bring management as part of the team, foster creativity and innovation, make it enjoyable to work there, right? Cool, we solved the problem. So this is the type of stuff that we hear all the time, right? It's like, okay, this is what we need, this is what we want to do, let's do it, right? Well, let's talk about that. Teamwork, right? We all know that people that work together can get more done than two can individually, right? If they can trust each other, if they can get along, if they're comfortable, if they're aligned, and so on, right? There's so many caveats to these statements that we need to be able to understand and figure out how to implement. Management is even more complicated, right? Managers can definitely lead teams to success. We've seen it, we've heard about it, and so on. But it only works if they're part of the team, if they can get the team on board, you know, if they actually listen to the team, and on and on and on. And so you can see immediately, right, why it's hard to have a good manager, right? There's so many things that go into this that are really required in order to make that person an effective manager, or make all the team members actually work well together cohesively. And so what we're really talking about is team culture. We want to be able to create an environment that makes all of these things possible and make people comfortable doing these things, so that we can all kind of work together in order to actually get all those gains that we know are possible. So this is where choose movement comes in, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So first of all, we're all engineers and scientists, right? We really want to have a specific set of steps to follow, and we want to just use those steps every single time, learn them inside and out, and then we will get the result that we expect, right? The problem is people are people. They're constantly changing. They're all different. Everybody communicates differently and wants to be communicated to differently, right? A lot of the time, you'll get somebody who's very direct, but if you're direct with them, it's always like you're hitting a wall, right? You have to really understand how different people communicate. Everybody has their own personal issues. They change their minds, right? It's very complicated. So there's no one process that's going to solve all of these problems. What we're really after is a set of skills that make us adept at recognizing these situations and being able to address them appropriately at the correct time, right? The good news is people have been researching this for years and years and years, right? You can learn from TED Talks, you can learn from research. There's plenty of management consultants out there, books like Traction, all sorts of different stuff. So what Choose Movement has done is essentially go through and over the last 6 years, take a look at all this research and try to consolidate it down into one program that people can use in order to actually apply these and take advantages of all of those different insights that people have over time. Choose Movement was originally focused on individuals. It boiled all of that down into 13 behavioral skills, and it's a free program that you can sign up for. ChooseMovement.org. It kind of walks you through, explains, and gives you day-to-day things that you can do to practice. This is all very text-heavy, so you can download it later and learn more about it. But just some examples, right? Extra mile, the first skill here. This is the idea of learning to identify situations where you can put in some extra effort and get a lot back out, right? Contrary to popular belief, putting 110% into everything you do is not the right way to be successful. It actually is just a really good way to burn out. And so if you can learn how to identify those high impact situations, then you can be much more effective at your use of time and be more successful yourself. Another one that's really good that a lot of people don't talk about is trust. And this is not only learning how to demonstrate that you're trustworthy, but also learning who to trust and how to grow trust. So there's a lot of really good skills here that you can learn about, and they apply really well not only to your personal life, but then also to the business. So luckily we have the Choice Framework, which is a more recent program that takes those same skills and applies them to a team environment. And so Choice Framework is a much newer framework that it's tightly coupled with Agile principles. The philosophies are very, very similar, and the way it works is you essentially work together as a team. You start at tier 1, and you practice these things and have exercises to do together, and you graduate as a team to higher and higher tiers as you can demonstrate using these skills and improving your efficiency and working together. So what we care more about is real-world examples. What might this look like on your team? So one example that we use at our company every week are push goals. And this is just the idea that you're going to pick one thing every week that no matter what, you're going to really try to do a great job at it. And you want to make sure that you're choosing something that is going to have a big reward. So we're a consulting company, so that might be a presentation to a customer or stakeholders to really make sure that we can knock that presentation out of the park and demonstrate, the full value that we can provide or that we have already provided, right? Now, once a month, I think it's also really important to make sure that your goals are team-focused, right? You don't want everything to be just focused on improving the business, right, or gaining more business. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create this positive environment so that everybody is happy to be working there and wants to be working there. So by getting everybody to think about how they can make things better for the team, it makes them a lot more invested and motivated to actually be part of the team, and they feel more appreciation for their team members. One really good example is we had a bunch of whiteboards that we had bought, and we were also busy, nobody put them up, so we couldn't use the whiteboards. And so eventually Eric one of the members of our team was like, all right, I'm just going to put these up. This is going to be my push goal. I'm going to make sure they're up. And we immediately, right, we're using whiteboards all the time, and it was a great success for us. So little things like that can make a huge difference for a team, and it also just creates that appreciation. Shutting down critics. This really comes down to communication, right? A lot of times, especially in technical situations, we have these situations where people think that they look smart by criticizing others, right? And so learning how to address that without increasing the negativity is a really important piece. So one quick tip, right, if say Bob, right, says that, they immediately start questioning and pointing out the problems with somebody's idea, right? You can just be like, well, hold on, I just want to learn more about this, right? Let's talk about this and see, right? You're not telling him that he's wrong for having concerns, but you're just saying, well, let's give it a little bit more time, let's talk about it. It supports the team, it shuts down the critic, and you can get on with your job, right? And so these types of kind of reframing of the way that you communicate make a huge difference. 10% freedom, this is another one that I really like. This is the idea that everybody on the team should get 10% of their time to work on anything they want as long as it's remotely related to work. Right? This might sound like a waste of time, but I can guarantee you it's really, really helpful. Because what happens is this makes people more engaged and motivated because they're excited about learning something new that they're actually interested in. And because it's remotely related to work, it's going to teach them skills that actually help with their work. And so it's a great way to get people more excited about their work, actually foster that innovation and creativity because they're getting more perspectives and ideas. And it's worked really great for us. Luke was interested in robotics, and he was making a marble sorter for a long time, and soon enough that taught him how to be better at speccing parts and working with motor controllers, for example. I was interested in web development, so I started looking at that, and now I feel like I can tackle building our own license server, for example, instead of having to subscribe to one. Right? So there's always these unknown benefits of these types of things, and really the more we know, the more effective we can be. All right, so your champion is you. I don't know if you guys went to Chris Salino's presentation, but he touched on this as well. No matter what, you are responsible for you, and that means that it's going to be on you to communicate your value to everybody else. And especially if you have a non-technical boss, how can you expect them to really understand how valuable you are if you don't communicate to them in a non-technical way? We all wish that everything was meritocracy, but we know, Betamax versus VHS or whatnot, right? It doesn't always work out that way. And so it's all a matter of how you communicate, what people hear, and making sure that you can actually demonstrate your value in a way that people see and understand. This doesn't mean bragging about yourself all the time, but it does mean actually making sure that people see your work and understand that you did it and contributed. All right, if there's anything I want you to take away from this presentation, it is this slide. This is my idea of value-based economics. So the idea here is that goals drive behavior, right? If you or your company is 100% focused on maximizing profit, then you're going to get driven and run all of your processes based off of maximizing profit, which means cutting corners, making things fast, sometimes doing layoffs, right? All of these other things that make people unhappy to work, right? Now, on the other hand, if you're trying to maximize the value to your end customer, okay, now you're trying to think of how do we make our product higher quality? How do we maximize our efficiency? How do we actually care about customer service, right? Because we're maximizing the value we're providing with our product or with our service to our customer. And so think about it now. If you have the choice to work for a company that, they're just going to get things out the door as fast as possible and drive you until, you can't do anything anymore, or something where you're actually clearly caring about your end user and you're trying to do a good job, which one would you rather work at? Which one do you think you'd actually be proud of working for versus not, right? So creating these goals and making sure that your goals are driving the right behavior is really important to creating that positive environment. The last example I'll use is your sphere of influence. It's much, much bigger than you realize, and if you just alone start practicing these types of things and demonstrate to others that it makes things really a lot better for you as well as the people around you, they'll tend to want to learn more about it and they'll start emulating it. So the more people on your team that start practicing these skills and start doing this, the more you can transform the culture on your team as well as in your organization. So, my company, Choose Movement Consulting, we're a small company, we're just 3 employees, but we've applied these concepts and ideas and skills in everything we do. It's in fact why I created this company in the first place. And we've been in business now for 5 years, and we've demonstrated that every single year we can gain at least 50% of revenue. 80% of our business is return customers, which means we've got happy customers. Employees seem to be happy, they've been sticking around. You know, and I think the biggest thing here is that the team is always trying to make the team better, right? We're happy to come into work, we're excited to do things, we're learning from each other, and we're always coming up with new ideas to make ourselves better. So definitely really recommend learning more about it. If you'd like the personal program and information, it's just choosemovement.org. And then if you're interested in the choice framework, please just email me or you know, just come and talk to me. We're looking at doing free 1-hour workshops with people in order to kind of get you started and see if it's something that makes sense for you. So feel free to talk to me and we can set something up. Thank you.
Right. So, here, this here. Changeovers are always fun. Everybody hear me? All right. I'll try to use my big boy speaking voice here. So, my name is Andy Fenley. I'm a CLA. I'm also a Center of Excellence Tech Lead at Corvo. I've been a test engineer for just over 2 years now. I have about 15 years of LabVIEW-based test engineering experience, so I've been around for quite a bit of time. But today I'll be talking about software process documentation. So actually I want to change that up a little bit. I'm not going to talk about software process documentation. I'm just going to talk about blank process documentation. There may be a little bit of software process in there, but the previous two, Will and Chris have been talking, of how your teams interact and how your teams do things, and all of that can be documented. If you don't have your processes in place, they don't exist. So that's my premise here. So what's the deal about documentation? What's important to document? How do you do it? That's a simple one there. How do you make it readable? If you're going to spend a bunch of time putting all of this effort into putting this in place, releasing it, maybe formally, maybe informally, how do you make it so that people don't just fall asleep at their desk? How do you maintain it? And then how do you trust people will actually follow this documentation? Okay, so what's the deal with software documentation? Again, what's the deal with process documentation? Why is it important? Again, I think it's important because if you don't have this documentation, there's nothing that you can point to say, this is what we do. This is how we do it. When you started at your job right now, I'm just going to show of hands. Who was handed a pile of papers for onboarding and said, read this? Okay. How fun was that task that first day? It's the worst, because you're sitting there going through. That would help you if you work in a controlled environment, like a medical device or contract. Those are even worse. That's a full week of reading very, very dry documentation about everything, of how you do things, how you do your job. But it's a little bit different in terms of software. I'll talk a little bit about it, but I think it falls into two main categories. The deal with software documentation is that you're trying to do one of two things. You're providing bus insurance. So what does bus insurance mean? So my boss always likes to use the term bus insurance. It's like, if I got hit by a bus, what insurance do we have that the team is not going to collapse for one of my processes? So what am I doing? What can I put down in place so that when I leave, when I get hit by a bus, when I have to take unexpected time off, when I'm not there for a day, how do I go about doing the things to replace me? Now, I know that everyone would like to think that everyone is irreplaceable. Nobody can take that away from anybody. But as it comes down to it, if somebody leaves the company, laid off, those things would get done anyway. It might be good to leave a little bit of a breadcrumb for the person coming after you. Maybe you get promoted. Maybe you're the ill-advised promotion from a developer into a project manager. How do you say, okay, well, this is what I was doing as a developer? And then the second is kind of a superset of all of that. It's the manual. This is how you do the things that you do. It's how you tell the team, okay, this is how you put together the Millennium Falcon. My job is to put together the Millennium Falcon all day long. So that falls into several different categories. It could be you, the person that loses their job. If it is a team member, something happens, everyone's been in a situation where they went and they pushed their code into source control on Friday, and they went on vacation all week, and the build was completely broken, and you had to scramble for the rest of the time to figure out what was going on, what were they doing, why were they pushing in the first place? Do you have any process to fix the build if they broke it in some subtle way? Does the person document their code well enough? The answer is no. Nobody documents their code well enough. Probably, I'm going to say that that's the case. So you'd want people to document not only the code, because we're kind of talking about software loosely, but how they do their job, the things that they do that they've put in place that you don't necessarily realize. Maybe you're a manager, maybe you're a coworker trying to pick up some of these things. If they were gone, what's the insurance there? And then a definable process. I was doing something at a previous company, and was asked to do something for a coworker, and I was like, wait, you just spent like 2 hours telling me how to do all of this. Is this written down anywhere? And he's like, no, not really. I was like, okay, well, how do I remember? I took good notes, but you're going on vacation tomorrow and not going to have any cell phone service. Like, this would have been nice for you to put together. It's a very complicated, very important part of your job that I'm trying to do when you're not gone. And so how do you put all that together? What is it that you want the intern to do? This is a question I have a lot with some of my bosses previously. Can you outline that? Can you say, well, the intern's in for a short amount of time. We want to spend a lot of that time bringing them up to speed on how they do things. We want them just to go out there and be a cowboy and just kind of shoot stuff down, make some cool stuff. Maybe. That's not usually going to be useful for the organization as a whole. So documenting what the intern should be doing, what kind of that level of developer does, that's probably a good idea. And the next one is kind of a ISO 9001:2015. For those of you who are certified in that, it's like, what do you need to do for that? Your process documentation needs to be there for a lot of these types of things. Controlled industries are very similar. I did a stint at a medical device company, and everything needed to be documented. So if you're working there, it's a little bit different of a situation, but there's a lot of work that goes into describing the process, describing what you need to do, describing your validation plans, describing how you do code reviews, describing all of that stuff can be done. Okay, so what's really holding people back from documentation? I think that the first statement there can be generally agreed upon as true. Most people generally say documentation is good. Especially you're coming in, you're starting something new, you're handed that huge pile of documents when you first start, have a good idea of what's going on. You go through and you read the LabVIEW help. Great. You get some code from GitHub and it's actually been documented. You can actually go through and follow what's going on. Awesome. But I think we can all also agree that we don't have enough documentation. So what's really holding people back from doing it? And that's really just the time it takes. There is a lot of time and effort that goes into creating something like the LabVIEW help. That's maintained by a bunch of people that are technical writers who do this for a living. It's very difficult to do. To kind of correlate with that time management and manager buy-in as well. if you're just on the schedule and you're getting 2 weeks done and it's going to take you a year to do, but you said 2 weeks and you're under massive pressure, what's the first thing that's going to slip? It's that documentation. If you can't write it down, it may as well not exist. So it's a kind of a tricky situation there because the time that you need to do something to document it is also, like I said, significant, but it's kind of necessary in a lot of ways. Okay, so what is important to document? This is when I stand up here and I tell you, I don't know. Like, it may change from company to company, team to team, person to person, what they feel is important to document. That's kind of where I would suggest to start, to say, what do you think is important to document? But I can't really pretend to tell you that the best place to start is X. Because that's going to change based off of your existing frameworks, based off of your existing experience levels, based off of a lot of different things about what it is you're going to be needing to document first. First and foremost, though, if there are any regulations surrounding documentation, probably a good idea to check those boxes first. That's it. That's maybe the first suggestion. I think that if everyone sat down and thought of something that they do at work that was hard for you to accomplish, that's probably a good place to start. For the previous kind of culture type of doing personality tests, maybe you actually say, let's all take a personality test on our team and see how those relate. Let's document that process. Let's document what kind of team building and personal development that we're going to implement in our teams. Put that in place. But I'm going to say the first thing that you can do is write your style guideline. That's an easy place to start. We're talking about LabVIEW software. I think a good style guideline is a really nice place to start. Why do I think that that's a good place to start? Well, I'll give you guys a couple minutes to read this. Read this XKC. Okay. So for LabVIEW programmers, I think that the style guideline fits in a slightly different kind of mindset than a lot of text-based developers think for the style guideline. The text-based, definitely they say, okay, you shall use camel case, you shall do this, all globals are capital letters. That's a fairly well established kind of thing, but what does that mean as LabVIEW developers? And I think that the style guideline is a perfect example of a place that you can start and make an impact, because it can be an informal document. It doesn't have to be thou shalt name globals thusly. It can say you should probably do it this way. But I think that there's a lot of ways to make this a more approachable document. So how do you make a document so that you're not going to fall asleep at your desk reading it? If you need any sleep aids, you can just take home this process document and read it. You'll be right asleep. I've had so many of those over the course of I've written way too many of those. It's very dry, very hard to get through. And sometimes it's unavoidable. I hate to say it, because sometimes these formal documents you have to turn in for regulation. You don't want to be out of line at all. You want to be very, very formal in your language. You want to be very, very formal and descriptive. But for things like a style guideline, where I feel like it's a good place to start a conversation with your developers, you can make it kind of conversational. Be like you're the senior developer talking to that intern the first day and saying, okay, well, here's kind of what we're thinking in terms of what we want to do for your development. We want to go through and we want to list some things that we think are really important. Pick those out. Find the things that you're like, okay, it really bugs me when X. Put that in as, that's the thing that you need to do. Just keep everybody happy in terms of what they're going to do. Maybe you have a bunch of other suggestions. Maybe you kind of link in a little bit of the LabVIEW style guidelines, which is terrible because it's just a checklist of things. How are you going to say, read this and follow all of these things? They're not going to do it. Like, if they did it, it's going to go one in and out the other ear. So I don't know. It's not an effective way to communicate what you're actually trying to do because nobody's going to read it and nobody's going to internalize it. Make suggestions, not rules. All of our style guidelines at Corvo are suggestions, except for a few things. Because if you have a reason to break the style, break it. Just be prepared to talk about it, but break it. Maybe I can convince you not to. Maybe you have a good, compelling reason to do something. It makes a conversation about the code a lot easier to have, rather than just saying, no, that error wire is underneath this other structure. It's like, well, I put it there because of all this stuff. It's like, I'd really rather see it here. It's a little bit harder for other developers. That's a little bit easier of a conversation to say, rather than having Bob, who's like, I'm gonna obscure this code because this is how I've done it all the time. Include jokes, comments. That XKCD comic that I just showed is in our style guidelines published at Corvo. Make it so that people can go through and say, okay, that's pretty cool. Maybe that's why I should read this. I have several other things. Like I spent probably way too much time in Excel making a joke for me about naming things. Like, just make it so that it's like able to be approachable by people when they open it up and they're going through it, and then you come across something that's kind of funny. That sticks in your mind. That's a thing that you can say, oh yeah, there's a joke about that in the style guidelines. Maybe I should remember it while I'm actually coding. Lots of specific examples and include screenshots. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory there. If you include screenshots of things you want them to do, don't want them to do, it's a lot easier for somebody who's coming up and has very little familiarity with what you're actually trying to. Overarching goals. Maybe you're giving a small thing and you want to make sure that the lower level code looks a certain way. If you're implementing that lower level code and that's all you ever see, you don't know why they're that way, it's a little bit easier when you go through and you're looking at these style guidelines. How do you maintain the document? So the documents should be living. They should be able to be maintained. And really, how do you maintain your code? I would say that you should do the exact same thing with your documentation as you do for your code. File bugs against it. File improvements against it. Check it out, read it occasionally, use it, hopefully. We have an option in our issue management to file for documentation. That's adding things to documentation, changing things how the documentation works, bringing it up all the time, talking about it. Me up here talking about my documentation caused me to have to go look through some of my stuff and say, oh, that's nice, but I don't want to think about that. So, I'd maintain your documentation the same way you maintain your code. And then, how do you enforce the use of the documentation? Now, enforce seems like a tough word to use when we're talking about this type of thing, so make it informal, make it blah, make it. So, Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. That's kind of the situation you want to do. If you want to have an informal type of style, informal type of documentation where you're saying, hey, you should consider doing this thing, consider doing this thing. Oh yeah, that one thing that we really, really, really care about, that's important. Do that. Here's how you check in code, all that stuff. Trust it, yet verify. Put automation in place wherever you can so that those kind of situations are taken out of their hands. Use VI Analyzer. That's an easy one to say, okay, we're going to do style guidelines. We're going to check it before your code reviews. Go ahead and run style guide, or go ahead and run VI Analyzer and bring that report, or make it part of your continuous integration process. That's even better. I'll take a note, a really quick kind of side note about the VI Analyzer. Don't run all of the tests. Don't do all of them. Just go through and spend some time selecting the ones that you really think are important. And it'll make your life a lot easier because you don't want to get pages and pages and pages of warnings in your VI Analyzer. You don't care. You're not going to use them. You'll start getting a bunch of those. You won't use them over and over, and that becomes a pattern, and you'll just stop doing the process. And then that's another story from the whole other side of things. If you have documentation of your process and you're not doing it, then you're in violation of your process. And so something needs to change. You need to file that bug, make sure you change that process, because it should be a living thing. If you start doing something and it doesn't work, change it. And the only place that you can do that is in your documentation. I'll point out that if you go to the VI Analyzer Enthusiast, just search VI Analyzer Enthusiast, there's a lot of information about how you can use VI Analyzer to do a bunch of different things. You probably went to some presentations talking about it already. So, all right, and that's all I have. I think at the end here we have like 10 minutes. We're going to have a little bit of a forum, so if there's anything that you guys want to talk about for the three of us right now, we'll stand up in front of you guys and try not to make fools of ourselves and answer questions. So that's all I got. Okay, so any questions about personalities, personal experience, the documentation, center of excellence? About how there are two spasmatics? Yeah, Spasmatics is a franchise band. It's kind of funny. So if you went to the party last night, saw a Spasmatics play, and then happened to wander by the Cedar Street bar, and you were at the bar on the way back to the Hilton or the convention center, there was another Spasmatics playing at the same time. So, yeah, there are two Spasmatics. Anybody else? Any questions? All right.
How do you include into your team and make them feel as though they're really part of the team? Developers or workers who are remote. I mean, like we're in Houston, Texas. We got one guy in Arizona, another guy up in Ohio. How do we sort of make them feel as though they're part of the whole process?
Okay, so I'll have a go at answering this and then see if Will or Andy have anything to add. I actually am, I guess, kind of a remote worker myself. One of the things that I like to do is first have some kind of a very live chat client, be it Slack or Skype, and call it the water cooler or something like that. And it's a virtual water cooler where people can actually go and have those conversations that are maybe on the periphery of actual work or what they're working on. You know, like, hey, I've got this problem in LabVIEW, it kind of sucks, what do I do about it? Or did you have a good weekend? But actually, those levels of interaction, and the fact is it's very rapid and real time. I like to do things like that. Code reviews are great for putting people's name up there and saying, hey, somebody's got this really cool piece of software that they've worked on, we're going to do a WebEx. I mean, it is difficult, right? There's not going to be some magic bullet that's going to make the guy feel like he's in the office. Another little thing I like to do is, you've got some allocated hot desks in your office, so when that person comes to visit, get them a name flag. You know when they're going to be visiting, put their name on that desk. Make them feel like they have a place in your office when they come into town.
So I'll take the chat room a little bit further actually, and I mean we don't go remote, but I actually did remote for about a year as well, and having a place like on Slack or something that it doesn't even have to be work related at all. Like, we actually have a random Slack channel, right? And so people just anything they like, they think it's funny, whatever, they post it, and so that gets people more involved together, right? Posting memes, whatever they care about, right? XKCD comics, it doesn't matter. On top of that, I still think that as much face-to-face interaction is still really helpful for people to feel like they get to know each other better. And so if it's at all possible to have like a weekly meeting or something like that where it's actually a video conference and you can see each other and get to know each other's mannerisms a little bit more, have an opportunity to not only talk about business but joke around a little bit, those types of things make people a lot more connected. And so then they're much more willing to talk about work-related things.
I would say that making as much point as possible to bring that person local on site. It costs money and it's expensive, but being able to go and have beers in the evening and have a couple meals together and stuff like that really makes a difference. I worked remote with a team in Sweden for a year, and being able to go and hang out with them outside of work is 100% what made it possible.
There's also a book called Remote Office Not Required that talks a lot, like I would recommend that book. It talks a lot about the things that they mentioned and a few other things. It's a really good book.
Thanks. Other questions?
Do you find the 10% free time tends to expand a little bit?
I think that kind of, it expands and contracts based off of how much work they have. And actually, I mean, if you guys want to talk about it a little bit, how you feel about it, but from my perspective at least, I see, because they're invested in the team and making it successful, that although they really enjoy things and they're trying different stuff, they're always really good at prioritizing what needs to happen. You have anything to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's about the understanding the priorities of the team, right? I mean, if there's no priority, like if your manager or whoever can't articulate what your priorities are, then, yeah, you know, you'll kind of gravitate to doing whatever you want to do. But when there's clear, like, oh, we gotta get these things done this week, right? I actually find, I mean, this is a personal thing, but for myself, I actually struggle to take that 10% as opposed to, like, just working on the other things that we're trying to get done for clients or other projects.
Sir.
Have you put a good case together to convince the funding stream owners to commit to 10% free time?
So I didn't quite understand. You say put a case together? Or?
Yeah. So if you're not a direct contract owner, so it's going to come off bottom line, it's going to come off overheads in terms of the cost to do that internally, 10% free time.
And so you're talking about like justifying implementing it at your company? Yeah, I think it's one of those things that's a challenge because especially right now, everybody's really focused on making everything measurable, right? And everything I just talked about is very hard to measure, right? And so it's one of those things where it's something that I'm actually working on, right? Is figuring out how to quantify that and kind of be able to justify that a little bit better. The best I can do right now is just say that from experience, like every single time we do it, it ends up working out. But it's more of an investment, right? Because we don't know when that next project is going to require something, and all of a sudden this idea pops in your head that makes it way easier, and it's because you worked on this 10%. But I can say that, you know, if you're happier working because you get to work on fun stuff, you're always learning new things, it's going to make you more effective, and you're going to be better to work with, right? Because you're in a better situation. I think that at least those things are already easy to understand. But yeah, we'll have to work on putting together some more tangible examples to see like risk reward type of stuff.
Well, I know that like 3M, I mean, that was one of their things. I don't know if it's for everybody, but for certainly the people in R&D, they had an opportunity to, they were expected to do that, and you got innovations like sticky notes, right? That came out of somebody's 10% just messing around time, right? So, you know, there are some really successful companies that have had a culture of doing that. If you really want to find some opportunities to show, hey, no, look, if we want to be, have as many products and patents and all that kind of stuff, like you got to let people just think about stuff.
So I know at Atlassian, they also do something similar, and I think they give you more, 25% time, something like that.
Oh, great.
And then every Friday, you can come in and present on what you're working on, and they bring food and beer and stuff like that, and kind of make it a celebratory thing to reward people for working on these things, to see what other people are doing, and a lot of people really like that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if you heard, Atlassian apparently gives you up to 25%. So that's great. I'll have to learn more about that.
I worked on a contract at the Air Force Research Labs in Dayton, Ohio, and they had a policy that they called Research Friday. And every Friday you spent not doing your work, doing research. It's like if you have an idea that you think might make something better, to be able to research that, to look up papers, to read papers, to do and the way being in the military, I mean, the way it was basically implemented is they got the commanding officer of the laboratories behind the idea. And he said, he says, all right, Friday, no regular work, everybody, you have the, chance to do research. And it was really valuable because, it sort of opened up things, gave you time, gave people time to look into stuff that, changed the way they work, changed, the way they address problems. But which, without having that time, they would have had the time to look into it.
You kind of frame it as like self-driven professional development too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So please email me all these ideas and case studies. I'm always trying to make it better, so that'd be awesome. All right, thank you very much.